12, Mark.
Alrighty, welcome to Humans of Iowa State. Before we go ahead and get started, I'm just going to have you introduce yourself. So go ahead.
My name's AJ Perron, and I was the host and producer of the Pocket Science podcast.
Awesome. So as you know, I sent you an email explaining this, and I kind of mentioned to you before we started how this is going to kind of roll, but it just starts with one prompt. Tell me your story.
Oh, man. So I grew up in Minnesota, and I had a high school friend that I would, I guess, commute to and from Minnesota with when we go back for holidays and stuff like that. And in my freshman year, we did a lot of road trip questions in the car rides. And most of them were pretty quick. Sometimes those get kind of cliche, the kind of questions you ask. One of them stood out in particular. It was, do you think aliens exist? And I think that took us from about Albert Lea, Minnesota, all the way back to Ames, which is just about 2 hours of talking about one subject.
Yeah.
We kind of joked as we rolled into town. We were like, oh, we should start a podcast about this. And that was kind of before, guys saying they were going to start podcasts took on a negative connotation. And we were both pretty enthusiastic people, so we knew that the resources existed on campus and stuff. And we started our show from there. I think we had already designed our cover art by like the end of that day. We were really excited. Flash forward a couple months, we had probably like 6 or 7 episodes in the bank. That friend ended up moving back to Minnesota to study at the University of Minnesota. And so I had my roommate join me for a couple episodes as well. And the energy was still there and the enthusiasm was still there. So we just kept going. But things really kicked off when I just kind of started sending out emails to random celebrities in that study space and do all that kind of stuff. Honestly, just to kill some time one afternoon, because why not? And Neil deGrasse Tyson actually ended up like picking up on one of our emails and responding and asking if he could come on. And that was kind of like a defining moment for us where things flipped and we started like really taking it seriously.
Yeah.
After that episode aired with him, I made it like a goal to make an Instagram video, TikTok video, YouTube video every single day, all summer. Wow. And that summer ended up getting us probably our first maybe 2,500 followers. Wow. And then after that, from those videos, I was like, well, why just stop at the summer? So I ended up basically for the next year and a half making a video every day. And we really took off on Instagram. We ended up with pretty much near 120,000 followers, and our videos were hitting millions of views at least once a week, basically.
That's crazy.
And so, I don't know, at that time I just I was all over it. I couldn't be stopped, It was probably the most fun I'd ever had doing anything in college, is you get to talk about something you love every single day. You get to share with people online, and the internet would just grab it and run with it. And I ended up taking a co-op at Collins, and even then when I was working full-time, I was still doing that on the side, and that would take like 15 hours out of my week at least of just side work. We were putting out an episode every other week and putting it on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and stuff like that. We were getting to the point where we had a fan base who'd write in about the show and ask us questions and stuff like that, and we were starting listener-oriented segments and stuff like that. And it was really interesting to go from, at the start of the 2 years where I was just making because I wanted to record these conversations with my friend to wow, it's kind of became a job, a fun job,
yeah.
You can have a job and love it. But for a while it's just so much work and I didn't even notice it because it was just a blast. It was crazy how fast I got used to that, lifestyle of being a student and an employee and also making this show, I guess. And people would talk a lot about how, it seems like so much work, how do you have so much free time and stuff like that? But when you have so much fun doing something, you don't even notice it,
Yeah.
So shortly at the beginning of last semester, things just kind of started getting busy for me. So we took kind of a hiatus on the show. But even since then, and I took a break from social media altogether because I don't know. At some point, I don't see social media persisting in my life, and I don't think it's a tool that is used by most people in the way it was intended. And definitely as a creator, you feel kind of subject to the people who run the platform, and that's not super fun. So we took a break from it, and even now we still get huge amounts of activity, I guess, on our episodes as people listen from the start to the end of that series.
Wow. If you don't mind backing up a little bit for me, you were raised in Minnesota.
Yes.
Is there anything from your childhood that brought you into the passion of learning and getting ideas about space and learning from others and talking to others and just grasping information from other people? A lot of people seem to really enjoy learning from textbooks or online, but you started a podcast because you really enjoyed talking to others, specifically about space. In fact, Neil deGrasse Tyson was on it. So anything from your childhood that maybe formed that passion?
I was a big gamer.
Yeah.
Honestly, that's part of it. That was the step into science fiction, and from there it's just like endless science fiction movies. Star Wars is a pretty basic one. Big into Star Trek as well, but also just like all the Marvel movies, I guess. I was a huge consumer of science fiction in general. There was a book though I remember getting when I went to the University of Minnesota library for the first time, I think for like History Day in 7th grade or something like that. And I made my mom get me this book. It was called The Physics of Superheroes. And it was the first time where somebody had related that science fiction stuff to actual science.
Yeah.
And talking about why some superhero powers would or wouldn't work and stuff like that. And it kind of blew my mind that you can take these fictional characters and worlds and make actual intellectual conversation about them. Like there's actual discussion to be had about this, this kind of stuff. So I remember that being huge. I also remember when I was in 7th grade, I really wanted maybe not 7th grade, maybe 6th grade, I don't know. I wanted my science teacher to think I was just like, just super smart. So I would look up like ideas of, I don't know why I thought this was so genius. I guess I was smarter. I'm smarter now than I was at 11 years old, but I would look up like ideas of other scientists and literally write them in a notebook, and I'd show it to my teacher and be like, I came up with a new concept or a new idea. Like I'd write stuff from Stephen Hawking or Albert Einstein, and popular stuff too, and I was like pretending I was like writing this off as my own. And he was super nice to actually play along with me, but I don't know, if you have supportive teachers and supportive parents and a little bit of science fiction, I guess that goes a long way.
Yeah, absolutely. My next question I have for you is just a little bit of a play on what started your podcast. Are aliens real?
Wow. Oh, man.
Give me your best shot.
I think my answer to this question has changed half a dozen times since I started the show. I think the way I used to answer is yes. And that had something to do with, thinking if there was a higher dimension than the third dimension, that there could be aliens living in a higher dimension and we wouldn't know about it. Just kind of like if you imagine like video game characters on a 2D screen like Mario, in that 2D world, like we in 3D couldn't exist to them. It's kind of like the same way with 4D. It's like we wouldn't know if there are people living in a fourth dimension or something like that. Yeah. But that was just kind of like before I knew anything, Yeah. And then later I would come to the conclusion based off something called the barn door theory, which is like or barn door paradox, which is to say like, if we're not trying to hide from aliens in the world, our planet isn't trying to hide the existence of humans. Like we have lights and you can see them from outer space and stuff like that. Why haven't aliens came to us? And I don't know if there's a great answer to that besides the universe is just huge. It's massive.
Huge.
And even traveling at the speed of light, it would take a long, long time to get to even the nearest solar system, right? And if that solar system's not inhabited, then you have to go to the next one and the next one. And we already know that the chances of life are so small. So imagine, how far away that nearest life might actually be. And in no way would it ever be really that feasible for us to travel that distance and to close that distance. And what I ended up concluding, or I think my opinion now would be that that distance is kind of made for a reason, because we could keep searching forever for life elsewhere, but we could continue to neglect life here and the people around us. So I think there's something kind of divine about the fact that the universe is so big, and yet the portion that we're able to explore and to appreciate is so small. And there's physical phenomena like the speed of light that actually prohibits us from, reaching beyond that.
You definitely made me think with that one. I haven't really considered whether or not aliens are real, so I'm going to go home and consider what I think about aliens. So thank you.
Yeah.
All right, my next question I have for you kind of relates back to when you were the most busy during the time of your podcast, especially working at Collins, having your podcast, and being a student on campus. You had a lot going on. How did you manage to keep your schedule intact? How did you keep yourself on time, aware of your homework, good with your grades? How did you keep yourself in line?
Things were kind of a blur then, so I don't know if there was much thought that went into it, other than if you have a deadline and there's pressure on you and you're kind of the only one that can make it happen, there's no other choice but to do it sometimes. Yeah. Because, after going 365 days just making videos every day, it's kind of hard to fall out of that habit. You told yourself you're going to do something, and especially with the way Instagram is, you have to make a video every day to stay at the peak of your engagement. Mm-hmm. I definitely have experimented with, publishing times and publishing days and stuff like that. And all of that little stuff makes a difference. So I was kind of forced to be consistent if I wanted, if I was to stop doing it, it was kind of to give up everything that I'd done leading up to that point. Yeah. So at some point there's kind of no choice, but that's okay, because if you like doing that and like making those episodes and like working on that kind of stuff, it can be a blast. So honestly, that was the kind of work that for the most part was stuff I look forward to. It didn't feel like work, and that's what made it kind of easy to do. Now, did I maybe miss some assignments, deadlines, or was I late sometimes to other things? Yeah, but we're only human, so we can only expect to be perfect 70% of the time. So what does that mean?
Exactly. Another question I have for you regarding being on a podcast: how did your family respond to your newfound fame, especially because you were getting millions of views and you worked with Neil deGrasse Tyson? How did your family feel about that?
Well, I'll always remember how my mom responded when I first told her that I was going to start a show, because we had called her on the way into Ames that day. We talked about making a podcast because we were so excited. And she kind of, I feel like I could kind of hear her smiling behind the camera, like, okay, this is, you go for it, enjoy it, have fun or whatever. But it was kind of, at that point, even to me too, I considered it with the amount of hype you give a home music video you make with your siblings, Yeah. It's just something that'll live on your phone. Yeah. And then I remember it was literally less than a year later, probably 8 months or something like that, when I was calling my mom and telling her the people I was planning to have on my show. And that was one of those phone calls where you kind of have to pull it away from your ear and turn the volume down a little bit, because, man, how she was reacting was exactly how I was feeling in that moment, just pure excitement. So, but at the end of the day, my parents probably didn't care if I got 0 viewers or 100,000 viewers. They just liked that I was doing what I like to do, and they were listening to it since day one. So, yeah, that was really nice. I remember there was probably a couple of times where my mom or my dad called me. We were talking, and they were like, "Oh, I haven't listened to the new episode yet." And I'm like, "Don't worry, it's okay. It is fine. I appreciate you listening to it." But people would say that to me a lot. They say, oh, I haven't listened, but I should yet. I'm like, it's okay if you don't want to, like there's other people who will, and he's like, I don't need you to, but appreciate it. Yeah. So yeah, they responded very supportingly. And I remember my friends did too. I definitely, at the time we got Neil on, I was trying not to tell any of my friends because I didn't want to jinx it. And then the episode we were going to do with him ended up getting delayed, I think twice. And I was like, I must have accidentally like slipped up and told somebody and jinxed this whole operation. Like this is, am I getting played right now? This might not even be Neil's email, Yeah. I had no idea. But then from that moment, after getting him on, like I kind of learned a pretty valuable lesson, which is like, why would you, if you want something to happen, you kind of just got to ask, you starting is the hardest part. It's the same thing with any cool project, whether it's you got to ask the right person or go meet the right person or whatever. It's you just got to try. I emailed plenty of people that didn't respond to me. That happened all the time. But by the end of that, we had chatted with people in Hollywood, some of the people who made some of my favorite movies. The Martian is obviously a huge sci-fi, so when we got the production director on for that movie,
wow.
That was spectacular. And I remember his name's Arthur Max. He was a really cool guy. He's probably like 90 something or whatever, and still making movies. And he said, I got Gladiator 2 coming out this fall. Like, you should watch it. You can have me back on. And I was like, that doesn't have anything to do with sci-fi, but I'll think about it. And then you go to the movie theater and you see his name, and you're like, wow, that is no longer. Does it feel like there's a giant gap between me and like, celebrities? Not that I'm saying I'm a celebrity. It's just like you don't realize that those people are just people too. They go home and sometimes they have ramen for dinner, or sometimes they, whatever. So I ended up getting him on. We had some scientists that study the aurora on. I think by the time, have you ever watched the movie or the TV show The Flash?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Grant Gustin.
Wow.
Before we stopped the show, I was actually talking to his manager, and he was going to come on last fall to talk to us about kind of that science of superheroes thing. He was going to tell us about like what it's like to play a speedster, and how the production designers kind of like weave in the logic behind some of that stuff. So I was looking forward to that, and it's really ended up not being as hard as I thought to try to reel in some of those people and find those conversations and have those conversations. People are much more willing than you think to give you a hand.
You mentioned before about like the social media aspect of having a podcast, but what's something that average consumers wouldn't expect goes into the production of the podcast and the social media of it?
Coming up with an idea for a video is the hardest part. And you'll mull over ideas even after you make the video. Because if you have a bad idea, that's the end of the story. It does not matter how good that video is. So that's, and coming up with episode ideas. Just making something from nothing is so hard. Even whether that's just coming up with the episode idea or coming up with the episode title. And not making it sound like it was AI generated, even though sometimes it was AI generated, and coming up with the episode descriptions and all that stuff. Just something from nothing is super hard. I think part of it for me was when I would hit a writer's block or creative block, just do something and refine it later, because you'll never find the perfect idea or the perfect video or whatever, but if you're making something every day, you just gotta try, and you'll have videos that are bad, and then you'll have videos that are good. But yeah, coming up with the videos are the hardest part, especially when I'm trying to make videos that are funny. A joke I usually tell people is, at least the funny videos weren't really that hard for me, because to be funny once a day is not hard if you're funny all the time. Yeah, coming up with the ideas is brutal sometimes. Like, after you edit hundreds of hours of content, that part just occurs naturally. After you've interviewed people, you kind of figure that out naturally. After you've talked on camera for 60 hours about space, that stuff kind of comes naturally. But when you have to make a new idea, that's a lot harder.
How is, your studies carried over into the creative space? Like, what skills have you taken from that into your podcasting?
Persistence is one thing that engineering will teach you that is useful anywhere. You're going to have problems you don't know how to do, just like you're going to have video software that you don't know how to use. You just got to figure it out, you know? There's no other way around it. If you want to do it, you have to figure it out first. So that's always the hardest part, and I guess engineering teaches you that soft skill. But I like to say that the podcast was something that I had to learn just from scratch. I had no background in any of it. I'd never edited a video before. I'd never recorded a video. I'd never touched a mic. I'd never written a script. I'd never done any of that kind of stuff. I didn't even have, like, I had Instagram, but I don't think I'd ever even made a post on Instagram before I started that up. So it's like, you just have to figure it out. And that's kind of the most interesting part about the whole thing is I think it was a cool way to show people, like, you don't have to have a degree in something or a background in something or experience in something to be able to figure it out. And when I talk to people in job interviews and when I talk to people who are just curious about the show, I love sharing that with them because I think it shows, you know, that I'm a self-starter, but also that, like, it doesn't take anybody special, because if I didn't have any talent in it or any background, you know, and I can do it too, you know, why can't you, kind of thing. So
My next question I have for you is, what advice do you have for other young people hoping to start a podcast, a show, something like Humans of Iowa State, something similar to your podcast? What do you have? What advice do you have for those young people?
Well, for starting a podcast, I think any advice I could give for my show kind of extends beyond just making a podcast. I'd say there's I guess two pieces. First is, you know, kind of why not start? You know, every good thing worth doing. This isn't my quote. What do they say? Every good thing worth doing is hard. You know, there's no way around that. You know, there's no easy road. But have a little faith in yourself, even when you don't know how to make a podcast and edit shows and whatever, and you have no celebrity connections. Don't worry about it. Just you got to start. Your first episode is going to be the one you hate the most, because you're going to learn every time from the last one you made and continually get better. But just kind of leads to the second piece, which is just trust the process after that. So you got to start somewhere and then be persistent, and things are going to get better the longer you do it. It's not going to happen overnight. It certainly didn't for us. It took me over a year to, you know, gain any traction really in the show, but it is so worth it if you actually like what you're doing. So
yeah, absolutely. My last two questions I have for you are questions that I ask everybody on the show.
Cool.
So my first one is, do you feel welcome at Iowa State?
Oh yeah, especially in my department. I love my department so much. I wish, this is going to sound like an ad. Honestly, it kind of is, because I think a lot more people should do industrial engineering, but I love my department. I go to class every single day, and I'm never in a class with a professor I don't like, because there's no professors to dislike. Everybody in the major knows each other. That's a great part. I remember when I was looking for schools, I was picking between a lot of small schools, and then there was Iowa State, which was a big school. And the nice thing about a big school is you can always make it feel smaller. You can't make a small school feel bigger. So I got all the resources of Iowa State, including the podcast studio and all that cool stuff. But then I also got the ability to find groups and niches and stuff like that, and especially in my major, just like connect with other people. It is a very close-knit group. So
Perfect.
yes, I do feel welcome.
I'm glad to hear that. My last question I have for you is just a rapid question. Is there anything that we forgot? Anything else you would like our viewers, listeners to know about? Anything else you would like to say? Any shout outs you'd like to make? Anything like that?
I mean, shout out to Cindy Dalmeda, my original co-host, who now goes to the University of Minnesota. Shout out Judson Martin, who was my co-host for a long time. Nate Pinto, another co-host who's shown up on episodes. Jake in the SIC, always a big help. Danny also in the SIC. What's funny there, actually, I thought about this as I was naming those off. Like, I'm the one sitting in this chair who is talking about the show and stuff like that. But just like nothing good is easy, nothing good is done just by yourself. You know, you can be the smartest person in the world and you'll still need help from other people. So definitely appreciate everyone who's helped me be able to make what I made, because it's not just mine, it's theirs, and thankfully now it gets to be shared with everybody. So